Hey, what's up guys? So the season 1 patch notes have just gone live and wow, it is a shocker. Now today in this video I want to talk exclusively about the Druid changes because there are so many changes. I want to talk about the things that are actually going to make a difference. Now there were a lot of changes that were kind of like increased the amount of damage by 2%. We're not going to talk about that stuff because it's kind of not consequential. I'm going to talk about stuff that affects the main builds, things that are going to potentially change the way you play in season 1. Now one of those changes is the introduction of a new aspect that I'm actually really excited about. It's called Subterranean Aspect. This is going to make Poison Creeper's activation also cast Landslide in a circle around you, and Earth skills are going to deal 10 to 20% increased damage to poisoned enemies. This is a huge change for the Druid. If you remember way back to when I was first planning out how to play the Earth Druid in Diablo 4 first coming out, I definitely was very focused around Stormstrike and Landslide and Poison Creeper for getting those terra motes when you cast Poison Creeper. When you activate it, it immobilizes everyone, right? And that gives your Landslide guaranteed critical strikes. With this change, I think we can hold on to Poison Creeper the entire time with this build, which is really exciting. So I'm excited to put together some new build guides. Don't forget to subscribe if you want to see those for Season of the Malignant. Really excited about this new aspect, and I'm really excited to play Druid again in Season 1. So if you want to check that out, see how I put it together, don't forget to check me out on Twitch. I will be streaming on the release date, Thursday the 20th. So that's the one big change I'm really excited about. We're keeping Poison Creeper if we're playing Earth Druid. Really excited about that. And there's a lot of synergies with that, like pack leader. If you get a critical strike, you actually have a chance to reset the cooldowns on your companion skills. So that's actually really great with Landslide's guaranteed critical strikes. There's a lot of really fun stuff that I'm really excited to discover coming in season 1. Another aspect that was changed, unfortunately a nerf, was aspect of Disobedience. If you're familiar with Diablo 4, you know about this aspect. This is a really powerful defensive aspect. This actually made it so that your maximum armor was increased by 50% if you got a perfect roll, which is a massive amount. Armor is just so good, decreasing the damage you take from physical and all elemental damage. So this was nerfed. The new maximum amount of armor reduction is now 30%. So this means that your ability to really be tanky or really just reduce your damage in general in Diablo 4 has been reduced in season 1. A lot of people are pissed off about this, but honestly, we have to test it to be sure. Of course, no one likes to be able to die easier, but we're just gonna have to see. Maybe there's a better defensive aspect now, but this was really just the best in slot for pretty much everyone. So of course, Blizzard went after it. Another nerf that is going to probably make a lot of Druid players probably a little bit upset was Symbiotic Aspect Cooldown Reduction being reduced. Now previously this was a perfect aspect for reducing the cooldown of things like Earthen Bulwark, reducing Trample for that really strong Trample slide build, also for that low health Earthen Bulwark build. You could basically get your Earthen Bulwark down to 0 cooldown, right? If you stacked cooldown reduction and you also got a perfect roll of Symbiotic Aspect, because it reduces your cooldown. This has been reduced from 4 to 8 seconds that you could take off your cool skills to 3 to 5 seconds. So it's actually much worse. It has a lower minimum roll and a much lower maximum roll. So the most you can take off a skill is 5 seconds. This is going to probably really invalidate a lot of different builds. Definitely that Earthen Bulwark build. You can't just constantly cast Earthen Bulwark over and over. Trample slides is severely nerfed because of this. This symbiotic aspect, I'll admit I didn't really take full advantage of it. I didn't really play around with it as much as I wish I did, but basically those builds are probably somewhat invalidated now. You know, I can't confirm that, but I know that if you really wanted to be able to cast those abilities without a cooldown, you needed a perfect roll on Symbiotic Aspect. That new perfect roll is massively reduced, almost by 50% in fact. So that is 2 nerfs and 1 new aspect. So that is going to affect current builds. There's some skill changes as well that are going to affect current builds. Again, filtering out any of the inconsequential stuff. Number 1, the most important skill change in my opinion is that Grizzly Rage, when you got Prime Grizzly Rage, it made it so it granted you Unstoppable for the duration. That no longer is true. It will now only grant you Unstoppable for 6 seconds instead of while active. So after you use Grizzly Rage and for 6 seconds after you use it, you're going to be unstoppable. However, after those 6 seconds, you're going to be susceptible to crowd control again. This is a massive nerf in my opinion. Things like Tornado Druid, where you were a Grizzly Werewolf, it was really your only form of crowd control escape. You didn't have Earthen Bulwark, you didn't have Trample, you didn't have other things to get you out of crowd control, and so having that Grizzly Rage was very important in order to honestly play your character, because when you start doing nightmare dungeons, like there's so much CC in them. And so this was your way of remaining uncrowd controllable during your ultimate's duration. No longer, however, you can only be uncrowd controllable for 6 seconds while this is active. This is a massive nerf. It's going to make me trend towards Earth builds now, I think, for season 1, because Earth builds have Earth and Bulwark for unstoppable, Trample for unstoppable, and you can still go Grizzly Rage for 6 seconds of unstoppable. So I'd rather have more unstoppable than not. I mean, who wants to not have control of their character, right? And so I think a lot of people are also upset about this change. However, I'm just going to change the builds that I play because of this change. Another nerf that hit the Druids that's going to affect the builds you play is Stormstrike was nerfed. The damage reduction granted from it was reduced from 25% to 15%. This is pretty significant. It's a 10% DR reduction. Stormstrike was just so good. It's the best basic skill. It's still the best basic skill, let's be honest. It's just so good. They did buff Claw, but whatever, it's not significant. But Stormstrike damage reduction reduced is significant. It's 10% DR you're losing. So I did want to mention things like Storm Druid, Storm Claw Druid, Shred Druid, things. Anyone that uses Stormstrike is going to feel this 10% DR loss. This is in addition to Aspect of Disobedience nerf. So the damage reductions are all kind of being nerfed if you've kind of noticed that trend. But they actually did buff Tornado, which came to a huge surprise to me. I was fully anticipating Tornado would be nerfed, considering it's the best Druid spec right now, where you can just go Storm Wolf Tornado and just spam tornadoes and just down pretty much anything in a matter of seconds. Tornado damage was increased from 19% to 23%. Very small buff, but still a buff nonetheless. And honestly, a buff is better than a nerf, so I will take it. Very happy about that, honestly. Now, the fourth big skill change that I actually really like, and probably some people might not care, but Provocation is something that is in the, it's a bear skill passive. It says you get a guaranteed overpower after a certain number of seconds that you remain in bear form. Now, most people didn't get this. Actually, this was nerfed at one point, but they actually are kind of walking that back, strangely enough, and they're buffing it again. Check this out. Provocation threshold required for guaranteed overpower reduced from 35 seconds to 24 seconds at rank 1, getting that down to 16 seconds. Still, it's not the best, but a guaranteed overpower is a guaranteed overpower, and it's really awesome. Now, this is actually sort of in limbo, I would say. Is this a significant enough buff to encourage players to actually get Insatiable Fury instead of a legendary aspect in the chest slot? I don't know, but it's definitely because you have to be in bear form, right, for that amount of time. And mounting up takes you into human form, which takes away from the amount of time you're in bear form to get this proc. So is it good enough yet? I don't know, to be honest. Maybe not. Just because whenever you mount up, you're going to lose being in bear form. Insatiable Fury, you lose that aspect spot. Don't know if it's enough. And finally, they nerfed a spirit boon that almost everyone used, Masochistic. This gave you a 2% of your max life back anytime you had a critical strike. So this was so good for keeping you at full health pretty much all the time. This paired with Earth and Might, which gave you guaranteed critical strikes, basically gave you so much life back. It was amazing. They nerfed it. They ruined it. Just kidding. Masochistic now also requires a lucky hit chance of 75%. This is going to reduce the amount of times this occurs by roughly, I don't know, 25%. I don't really know exactly the math, but it's going to happen less often, I can tell you that much. So kind of a bummer. I really like the Masochistic spirit boon, but now it's nerfed. Now it's not going to happen as often when you get those critical strikes. How much less often, I can't say for sure, but if you play a build with like Landslide and you're like a bear and you're getting guaranteed critical strikes, you're probably still going to get a good number of them because it's on critical strike. So it's probably still pretty good, honestly. Hopefully they don't nerf it into oblivion, but we'll see. And finally, there is a new unique called Flesh Render. It's a unique one-handed mace, which says Debilitating Roar and Blood Howl deal damage to nearby poisoned enemies. How much damage? We don't know exactly, but at level 850 item level, they said it would be like 3,000 to 4,000 damage. So it sounds decent. I think this is going to be strongest with Blood Howl because as you slay enemies, your Blood Howl cooldown gets reduced, and so you can cast it over and over. Not to mention, werewolf skills will have that poison damage on crit thanks to Toxic Claws. And so I think Blood Howl, Toxic Claws, Flesh Render could be a thing where you're spamming Blood Howls to deal damage to those poisoned enemies over and over, and they're constantly poisoned from critical strikes with Toxic Claws and so on. And so I think it's probably how that's going to work. Will this be better than Accelerating Aspect? I don't know. Flesh Render sounds pretty good on paper, but something like Accelerating Aspect giving you 25% attack speed is really good. It is a one-hander, so you could keep an offensive aspect in your offhand, like a totem or something. But I don't know. How good is Flesh Render truly going to be? I can't say for sure. We're going to have to test it. Don't forget to click that follow button on Twitch to see me play some Druid in Season 1 and figure out all those answers. And don't forget to subscribe on YouTube if you aren't already. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Take care.